Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Oh, just had a technical problem there. Coming up on tonight's show, I'll be considering changes to the Human Rights Act. I'll be hearing from archaeologists who have excavated the remains of a woolly mammoth in a cave in Devon. Oh, my screen is flickering in front of my eyes. Anyway, good evening. I'm sorry about all of that. It will improve. Going to the latest news roundup from Miranda Shunk in the GB newsroom.
Good evening, it's 7 o'clock. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. An attempt to de-escalate tensions on the border of Ukraine by Presidents Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin on the phone this afternoon has resulted in no significant breakthrough. That's according to a US official who said that despite the call lasting over an hour, it remains unclear whether Russia is still willing to pursue the diplomatic path or whether it may move forward now with military action. However, Russia's foreign minister has accused the West of ignoring his country's proposals on security and says Washington is waging a propaganda campaign. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned there would be repercussions if Russia now launches an attack.
We and our allies have made this crystal clear to Moscow. If President Putin decides to take military action, we will swiftly impose severe economic sanctions in coordination with allies and partners around the globe. We'll bolster Ukraine's ability to defend itself. We will reinforce our allies on the eastern flank.
Well, meanwhile, in Ukraine itself, thousands of people are marching through the capital to show unity against threats from Russia. Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky has urged his citizens not to panic and push back against what he said was a glut of bleak war predictions being reported in the media. Despite this, many countries, including the UK, have urged their citizens to leave the country now, warning there won't be any military evacuations once commercial flights end. French police have fired tear gas at demonstrators in Paris after so-called freedom convoys made it into the capital. Inspired by the ongoing events in Canada, protesters are demonstrating against COVID-19 restrictions. So far, 300 motorists have been fined and at least 14 people arrested. Meanwhile, France has also just reduced its entry requirements for British travellers ahead of the half-term holidays. Fully vaccinated Britons no longer have to take a COVID test before departure. That includes anyone who has received their most recent dose within the past 9 months. Unvaccinated people must have a compelling reason to travel to France, as well as proof of a negative COVID test 48 hours before departure. And back home, Boris Johnson will continue to focus on the international crisis, despite being sent a police questionnaire about lockdown parties. That's according to Junior Defence Minister James Heappey. He says the Prime Minister will continue to attend National Security Council and Cobra meetings. The Met Police have contacted more than 50 people believed to have attended the parties. The PM has denied any wrongdoing. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Neil Oliver Live.
Welcome back. For the last 2 years, our society has failed our children. Parents, teachers, anyone who works closely with children reports rising levels of mental health problems among the under-18s that can only be described as surging. I would call it a rising tsunami. It is not COVID that has done this to our children. It is lockdown and all of its attendant miseries of state-fashioned fear, closed schools, cancelled exams, remote learning, isolation, stolen years. Between April and October 2021, more than 400,000 children in England were referred to the NHS for specialist care for issues including suicidal thoughts, eating disorders and self-harm. That was a 77% rise on the year before. Teachers and head teachers have had similar stories to tell of all manner of children struggling with their mental health. We can cut to the chase by saying the number of suicidal children has soared. Think about that. Suicidal children on our watch. We have all seen the damage done. All parents, I'm sure, can testify to elevated levels of anxiety, at the very least, endured by their children. In any event, a toll taken on young minds, young lives. Some of what has been done to some youngsters might last a lifetime. Fear driven by ceaseless propaganda, educations compromised, friendship groups broken. Some of our youngest left struggling with speech and hearing impediments severely exacerbated by mask wearing at a time when they need to see faces if they are to learn to communicate. There aren't many of us, I suspect, young or old, who can say the last 2 years have not left us altered and looking out at altered places, altered lives. Few would say, and again this is just my opinion, that anything has been altered for the better. But from beginning to end, it is our children that have borne the brunt of all of it, and entirely because of decisions taken by our leaders and their advisors. Wherever COVID came from, however it happened, for the mass of us ordinary people, it arrived among us like any other disease. Lockdown and the rest, however, were choices our governments made and enforced long after it was apparent such measures were doing only harm and no good. COVID barely touched our children. Our society hurt our children. They were told if they didn't behave, they would kill Granny. We were all told we were putting the elderly first, though anyone locked in a care home without visitors for a year or more probably didn't feel like much of a priority. For the first time I can remember, our society took the decision not to put children first. The grown-ups are meant to protect the children, all children, not just their own. That much is on page 1 of the Obligations of Adulthood. We all know it to be true and also right. If our species has a prime directive, a duty above all others, it is or should be to protect the children, shield them from harm, even if by so doing a toll must be taken on the adult population. But for these past 2 years, our society has done no such thing. On the contrary, our society has knowingly and deliberately sacrificed the well-being of our youngest, telling us wrongly as it turned out that such action would protect the oldest. This behaviour was anyway an inversion of all that is right. This is unforgivable. Children's lives have been, and this is as politely as I can describe it, put on hold. If you're 100 years old, 2 years is 2% of your life. If you're 2 years old, it's 100%. Extended periods of isolation from friends and extended family, None of the events and ceremonies that mark the milestones of young lives, no parties, no play dates, no graduations, a constant presence of state-sponsored fear tactics to keep COVID permanently on everyone's mind, our children included. Then, of course, there are the vaccinations. Millions of children at no measurable risk at all from the virus have been injected with vaccines for which there is and can be no long-term data about long-term effects. For months, some have been suggesting links between some of the vaccines and heart problems, potentially lethal heart problems, especially in teenage boys. If a boy catches COVID and gets a heart problem, that's terribly bad luck. If he takes the vaccine and gets a heart problem, that's an ill delivered straight into his arm by a medical professional. Louder and louder have grown the concerns from countless scientists and eminent physicians with lifetimes of experience about the safety and efficacy of vaccines, and yet children have continued to be lined up and jabbed. Always there are calls to vaccinate younger and younger children, 5-year-olds at least. I say this is evil. These risks with children, however small, and the juries are still out on that one, have been taken in the knowledge that the disease poses the vast majority of children almost zero threat. Rather, they have been vaccinated, and these are not my words, but the words of officialdom, to protect the adults around them. I listen to those words and feel nothing but shame for my generation and all the generations of adults who have watched this happen. Our society has stolen 2 years of our children's lives and pressured so many of our teenagers to submit to a medical procedure of uncertain safety so as to keep their mostly already vaccinated elders safe. Well done, all. Our society was not always like this. When the threat of war loomed like a darkness over these islands in 1939, plans were hurriedly set in place to get the children out of harm's way. In its first 3 days, beginning on 1st September 1939, Operation Pied Piper moved 1.5 million children from cities and towns deemed most at risk from bombing and into the countryside. Eventually, some 3 million children and vulnerable people were taken to safety. That's how our elders thought then. That's how our society used to behave. Making and keeping children safe used to run through our society like lettering through Blackpool Rock. In the early hours of the 26th of February 1852, the iron-hulled steamship HMS Birkenhead was en route to war in South Africa. Just 80-odd miles from her destination in Cape Town, she struck a reef of rocks. Aboard Birkenhead were more than 600 British soldiers, together with the wives and children of some of the men. Many of the uniformed men were raw recruits, collected at Cove of Cork in southern Ireland. For the most part, they had joined up to escape Angorta Moor, the Great Hunger, usually remembered as the Irish potato famine. All most of them wanted was the promise of regular meals. The senior fighting man aboard was Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Seaton, 38 years old and commanding the 66 men of the 74th Regiment that would later be the Highland Light Infantry. Despite the chaos of the night, those not already drowned or killed by the impact with the reef and the inrush of water assembled on deck. Green recruits, most of them, some terribly injured, they came to order on the sloping deck. Only 3 lifeboats were fit to launch, not nearly enough, and so Seaton made a decision there and then that changed maritime protocol forever. Before, in the face of such a disaster, the order was something like every man for himself. But Seaton had women and children to take care of, and so he did. All of those were put into the boats first. Seaton himself took up a position at the end of the gangplank while the boats were lowered into the water, with his sword drawn in case there was a rush towards them. No one moved, no one broke ranks. The remaining places were then filled in line with what the army has always called funeral order, which is to say youngest first. Once again, those closest in age to children were shepherded to safety, while those older merely waited, looking up into that African sky while Birkenhead slid lower. Not long after the lifeboats were rowed clear, Birkenhead broke her back and began to sink more quickly. The ship was captained by an old Navy hand named Robert Salmond, and he climbed into the rigging and shouted out to the men that they should swim towards the boats. "Save yourselves if you can," he shouted over and over. Understanding at once that such a move would swamp the lifeboats, Lieutenant Colonel Seaton cried out, "If you do that, you'll swamp them, and the women and children will be killed. I beg you not to do this. I beg you to hold the line." And so it was, and so they did. Green recruits they might once have been, but they were men now, and soldiers. And for the sake of the women and children, they held the line. The water into which they plunged then was shark-infested, great whites among them. Within an hour or two, 430 of 600 men were lost. Young men fleeing starvation made food for sharks. But not one woman and not one child was hurt. All survived. News of the Birkenhead went around the world, went viral, so to speak, and became legend. The call of women and children first is more properly described as the Birkenhead drill. When the story reached the ears of the King of Prussia, Frederick Wilhelm, he ordered that an account be posted on the wall of every barracks of his troops so they would learn and know what men were capable of. Rudyard Kipling immortalised their bravery in a poem, but to stand and be still to the Birkenhead drill is a damn tough bullet to chew. Seaton and his men had changed their world, changed the way people were expected to behave in times of crisis and danger. This is how they are remembered. This is their monument. Keep the children and the women safe, no matter the cost. And so what will be our memorial? Will it be a generation of damaged children, a generation of children for whom the future is blighted? I honestly don't know. I do know, however, that we can stop this now. We can, if we want, make children's lives normal again. No more masks anywhere. No more threat and fear looming over their lives. We can decide above all never again to allow a government to behave in such a way towards our children. Perhaps some of what has been done might be undone. As adults, as parents, we owe them that much, at least. Now, I've had my say, but on this show, we like to hear your opinions as well. So you can email and tell us what you think on gbviews@gbnews.uk, and you can tweet us as well @gbnews. If there's time, I'll read out some of your comments a little later in the show. Joining me remotely for the first time, I have the broadcaster and former MP Lembit Opik and the social commentator Mo Lovett from the Academy of Ideas. Hello, both.
Hi,
Hello.
good to see you.
Oh, how strange and unfamiliar to be greeting you both in your little rectangles. We'll see how this goes, shall we?
I missed you, and I have to say it's a miracle of technology that we can communicate at all. But of course, your words reach across the whole world. What you just said, Neil.
Well, it's a pleasure to see you both. What do you make of what I was saying? Do you agree with me, Lembit, that children have borne the brunt of this?
Yes, I do. I had a very bad experience after the booster, which I had, booster jab for COVID, and I don't feel comfortable about having another jab, to be honest with you. I don't want to tell people not to take it because I seem to have a very strong immune system, and that means that I had almost what amounts to toxic shock to the third jab. But here's the point. Here's what I think you're talking about here, Neil. We have to actually recognize that there has to be a degree of self-sacrifice. And yet something which maybe my fellow contributor today might want to address herself to is this. How much suffering do we want to actually administer to individuals on the basis of trust of government? It's not exactly what you discussed, because what you talked about was the clear and present knowledge by individuals who went to their death to protect women and children. We seem to be going the other way at the moment. We seem to be telling people that the women and parents and also children have to do a certain thing. And I'm not completely convinced that that will eventually encourage people to hold the line.
Mo, what do you think? Have we unlearned something profound and important about the responsibility that adults have to youngsters?
Well, I think there's definitely a need for what our responsibilities and our duties are as a society and to one another. And that's been true since time immemorial. We've always had this competing thing between individual rights and what's good for society. You could even argue almost all public policy decisions have that kind of conflict and compromise. There's always got to be compromise at its heart. Even if you think about the fact that we elect a government who might be a big on tax and spend, compared to a low tax party, there's something about paying higher taxes as an individual for a public service. So in some senses, we always make public policy decisions on those grounds as well. I think you raised an important point about vaccine mandates and about children. And, originally when the vaccines were introduced, it was for the elderly and the vulnerable who we knew were susceptible to COVID. But then, originally I think the JCVI said that, children, there wasn't enough data there to say whether or not they were safe. And then they said there was enough data and it wasn't. And obviously that's made people very hesitant. But the need for the, no, that's right, Lembit. I haven't finished my point yet. I'm just telling you what is true, not what I think about it. And I think there's a very valid point there that, why are we asking children to be vaccinated when they're not susceptible to COVID? And we know that the vaccines are not really helping transmission, apart from the fact if you don't get it, you don't transmit it, and that's it. So I'm not particularly for the idea of children being vaccinated at all. I'm very much against vaccine mandates, but the idea that we have never ever put individual rights against the collective good isn't true.
Here's the irony. I'm actually agreeing with you. I was shaking my head because of the frustration I feel about the very same thing that you're talking about. I don't want my 4-year-old to get an injection. I don't want my 4-year-old to have vaccination. The mother of my child was 8 months pregnant when she had COVID, and the child was born healthy. And I would like to suggest, and it's what Neil thinks about this, we cannot start allowing a free society to take control of our bodies. I've got the right to make bad decisions about my body, so I'm actually agreeing with you. But you know what's interesting about the fact that you thought I might disagree with you? It's because we're in such a cancel culture now that we end up being defensive about what we're doing. And on that side, I stand four square with you.
We will later in the show be discussing the proposed changes to the Human Rights Act and the possible advent of a Bill of Rights. And so we'll get the opportunity, Lembit, to raise again and to consider some of the points that you've brought our attention to. But Mo, if I could ask, I feel that we're way past a time when we need to hear some acknowledgement and apology from officialdom, at the very least in regards to what has been done to children, I would say unnecessarily. The compromised educations, the undoubted, the already measurable surging rise in mental health problems. Surely, at the very least, we are entitled to have that acknowledged and for someone to say, we won't do that again.
Well, I think the second point is the key one, that we must never, ever do this again. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think, as Lembit talks about this age of cancel culture, apologies tend to be something that people do under duress because they want to save their job. I'm actually worried that when we apologise, it's not always for genuine reasons these days. That, that's the contemporary feel about that. So I'm not sure an apology in and of itself is right, but we need some assurances that this will never happen again. And I think, and you mentioned the proposed changes to the Human Rights Act, and I think the thing is, the reason I'm a radical Democrat, the reason I think public policy decisions should be made by the public and their representatives rather than judges. I think there's a very big difference between human rights and the Human Rights Act, because one is our inalienable rights, that you were talking about, and then the human rights legislation, which means that judges who are unelected by us and who are unaccountable to us do not take decisions over our lives. So I'm very cautious about the fact that we might start putting things into law rather than having public policy decided by the public and their representatives.
It's interesting, actually, Mo. I'm not sure if I disagree with you, but let me just test this. I think that a lot of the time the public don't have the data to make decisions, but we live in a democracy. Now, when it comes to COVID, I think that no authority anywhere in the world has the right to insist on allowing children to be vaccinated. I just think that's wrong. Even if it's a good idea, I think it's wrong. When it comes to the environment, it's a different thing, because I think that we've got a parallel analogy. I won't go deep into this, Neil, but I think that we're being told what we have to do when the science isn't necessarily settled, despite what people say. So, Mo, where do you stand about the difference between scientific information and the right to democracy? Let me put a heretical thought to you here, Mo. Imagine if people like me don't think that the human beings are wrecking the environment. How do we actually have the right to express that when the cancel culture means that, for example, the BBC don't have to provide balance?
Well, I think that's why it's really, really important to fight against cancel culture, because I don't think opinions are just formed by data. They're not just informed by information, by graphs, by models, and all the rest of it. We have values. We have values that we have enshrined in our constitution. Okay, it's not written, but it's written, but it's uncodified. But these are, we have British values. We have human rights values as well, and these aren't always dictated by graphs and evidence-based policy and all of that sort of stuff. And this is why, and Neil sometimes says, why do you keep saying we need more public discussion? This is why we need more public discussion. We need to be in a public arena where we decide for ourselves. I was at a meeting the other night when we were talking about mandatory vaccines, and there was a variety of views in the room. And by the time you'd finished that meeting, you couldn't help not only understanding the variety of views, but the space between them and how you felt about the entire landscape of that. So we need to fight against cancel culture. We need to get politics out of our education so that children are learning knowledge and they're learning to form their own opinions about the world. And we need to fight back against some of this authoritarianism. But I don't think the answer lies with a change in government particularly, or even, not that I'm a fan of the current government, but or a change in legislation. I think it has to be an organic grassroots thing where people discuss these issues and decide what values are important to them. And if you're a Democrat, you trust people.
We'll pick up all of this later in the show. We'll get back to this. This is so important. I also want to get back to what has been done to children in all sorts of ways, practical education. The milestones of life, normal children's lives, you're so disrupted. I want to talk more about that, but have to go to a break, after which, as a document circulates suggesting possible changes to our human rights, I'll be asking Mo and Alenda if this will lead to erosion of bodily autonomy. See.
GBNews is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, human rights, as we have understood them, are innate and inalienable. Implicit in our understanding has been that those rights exist for everyone. Of paramount importance is that our human rights are not, absolutely not, in the gift of governments. It is with all that in mind that it seems timely to pay some attention to the fact our government is circulating a consultation document with a view to throwing away the old rights and replacing them with new. Current human rights legislation might make way for a so-called UK Bill of Rights. Instead of accepting human rights as ours by birth and untouchable, it seems the government favours a sort of quid pro quo arrangement. In future, if we do not meet what the government considers to be our responsibilities to wider society, we may not be seen to deserve those rights we always had before. The consultation document notes, quote, the growth of a rights culture that has displaced due focus on personal responsibility, close quote. Also, open quotes, the Bill of Rights will make sure a proper balance is struck between individuals' rights, personal responsibility, and the wider public interest, end quote. For years now, talk of free speech has been polluted with vague, ill-defined notions like, quote, stirring up hatred and causing offence, close quote. More recently, we've learned about the perils of, quote, spreading misinformation. There's vague talk too of the greater good. That greater good would be as defined by whoever is in charge at any given moment. Your rights and your child's rights as individuals with bodily autonomy might be set aside for that greater good. It's all very interesting to say the least, and I don't propose that we get to the bottom of it all right now this evening. I would, though, like to start the conversation. So, here still with me to discuss all of that, former MP and broadcaster Lembit Opik and also Mo Lovett from the Academy of Ideas. I'm so pleased that the technology is keeping you with me so far. Mo, I'll come to you first. On the one hand, when it comes to COVID, governments seem to be loosening restrictions, but are they, while we're distracted by Partygate and the rest, quietly readying themselves to further erode our freedoms?
Well, Neil, I think you rightly raised this consultation on the government's proposed Bill of Rights paper that they've put in, and people are able to go and contribute to that process. I think we've got till the 8th of March to do that. There's lots and lots of problems with it. However, I would caution slightly, as I was saying earlier, there is a difference between human rights and human rights laws. And, to repeat what I said earlier, the problem with human rights laws is once you enshrine something into law, then whether or not somebody has behaved illegally or not becomes the purview of judges. Okay, that's kind of the point I was making earlier. But you raise a bigger question is about, in a democratic society, who should be making laws? And now this proposal for a Bill of Rights does, in fact, first of all, it won't get us out of the European Convention on Human Rights, which a lot of people have found problematic because it's stymied the British judicial system, and they specifically have ruled that out as a process. That's really important for people to know about that. But I would be very cautious of thinking that human rights laws are the same as human rights. And they've called this a Bill of Rights. Actually, we already have a Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights with the Magna Carta, the Acts of Parliament of 1911 and 1949, these were all based on exactly what you were talking about, these inalienable rights, because they were part of a public conversation. It's sort of the tail end of the Enlightenment with people like John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and all the rest of it. At the start of a democratic, liberal society, we had a public conversation. Okay, not all of the public was enfranchised at that point. It was propertied men, women weren't part of it. It wasn't the working class man and all the rest of it. But that was when there was an aspiration for us to be a liberal and a democratic society. And I think we live in different times now. And this Bill of Rights that they're proposing really kind of reflects that that change in ethos. And if you want me to just make one more point, the reason I'm concerned about putting too much faith in human rights law is if you look, it was 1998 that the Labour government enacted the human rights law in this country. And since then, as you rightly say, we've had a whole host of liberal laws. All of the hate crime legislation that we've talked about, incursions on our free speech and our freedom of expression, things like the police and crime bill, which is going through at the moment. There's been a whole host. So in actual fact, human rights laws aren't necessarily a great, robust defence against for liberty.
Lembit, if I could come to you, consultation documents like this, they so often evade public attention. They slide by us. Would we be right to be at least slightly suspicious that this is coming forward now while we are so distracted and have been so distracted by COVID, by the pandemic, by threats to our rights? Is there anything that the paranoid amongst us should be pricking up our ears at, that this is on the move at the moment?
Yes, it's not paranoia. I think that we currently have a government which is on the ropes, which is looking for something to do to defend itself. Now, I am an intense libertarian. We don't need to go into the details, but I would pretty much legalize and tax and regulate everything, but I wouldn't ban things because, for example, an addict is going to be an addict whether it's legal or not. What I'm really concerned about, and why I agree with the inference of your monologue, Neil, and also what Mo overtly said, is for this reason. We cannot pretend to be a democracy if we think that we can give up human rights on the basis of some greater good in order to protect ourselves. I mentioned in passing the environmental agenda, and I know we're not really discussing this tonight, but my big concern is this whole human rights thing is based on the fact that the government and governments around the world want to tell us that we can't do A, B, or C because we have to behave in a certain way that relates to D, E, and F when it comes to the environment. But let's get back to the discussion that you raised tonight. In simple terms, I can say it in a 10-second sentence. It's okay to offend people. In an environment which is free, you've got the right to offend people. But the cancel culture seems to be in such a situation now where offending people is going to be banned. Jimmy Carr was very controversial in what he said, whether you like his joke or not recently. I'm not going to repeat it now. When it comes down to it, we've got to ask ourselves, all of us have to ask ourselves this question. In a free country, in a world where we've actually got the right to be free, should Jimmy Carr have been allowed to make that joke about the Holocaust or not? I say he should have been allowed to make that joke, and then people can choose to buy tickets for his events or not. And all of that seems to fit together, and I think Mo summed it up very well.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that about freedom of speech. Given a binary choice, I would always go with the most freedom of speech, the most freedom. Mo, if I can come back to you, what troubles me amongst much is the vague nature of the language within a document that relates to our fundamental rights. Terms like the wider public interest and the greater good, they fill me with dread. The greater good has been the supposed justification of totalitarian regimes since totalitarian regimes were first thought of. Something similar happened with the hate crime bill in Scotland, where there was a we were supposed to be taking action against stirring up of hatred, and which begs the question, who defines hatred and who defines the stirring up of it? Am I right to think that this is too vague and too open to interpretation by here today, gone tomorrow politicians?
Well, my point is that it wouldn't be the politicians, it would be the judges. Once it's enshrined in law, it becomes the judges. I hope I'm not going to lose my internet connection here, Neil. We don't need another disaster. I think you're right to be cautious, but again, what I would say is just because you don't like this government doesn't mean that we should give up completely on governments forever. I was talking to somebody this morning, they said, who's going to replace Boris? Nobody in the Tory party I fancy. I look at the opposition benches and I think that's a load of rubbish. And I think that is making people very anti-establishment, but not necessarily in a very good way. So people are becoming very nihilistic about the democratic structures that we have in place. And that to me is slightly problematic that we are not trusting our structures.
I don't feel it's nihilistic. I simply think that if a society internalises the idea that figures above them are allowed to define the greater good and the wider public interest, then that's the road to hell. Once you accept that someone else is making those decisions for you, then you're in trouble.
Let's understand. Yeah, absolutely. Let's understand. If the government decides the greater good means we have to never drive a petrol car again, if the greater good means that we can never cook with gas again, does that mean that our personal civil liberties should justifiably be limited? I say no, because when it comes down to it, we're about to make a fatal mistake as a society if we let the government do this. We're about to allow the government to change the idea of fundamental human rights into as long as it doesn't contradict government policy. My parents escaped Estonia, and not all of my family did, from a totalitarian system that terminated people because they stood out and they objected to the Soviet system. I don't think that the UK fought 2 world wars and really stood proud in World War II to defend our freedom and our liberty, to now slowly erode them, just like Mo implied and in line with what you just said as well, Neil. My challenge to the government, I say it here on GB News, is justify why it's right to take away civil liberties in the name of which policy. Put the data down and then fundamentally explain why we, as the people who pay your salaries, government, can't decide yes or no.
Powerful and illuminating insights from you both. Thank you for the moment, Lembit, and thank you, Mo. Going to another break, after which I'll be speaking to TV presenter and marine biologist Monty Halls, who helped rescue a stranded dolphin off the south coast. Coming up.
Start off your GB News Sunday with Stephen and Anne at breakfast from 6 a.m. At 10, Michael Portillo joins the political correction. From 12 till 6, it's Alistair, Darren and Nana. At 7, join Free Speech Nation for a laugh that won't be cancelled. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Sunday on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back, and in a dynamic and ever-changing programme tonight, I have been joined, finally, by a panel guest. With me, Greg Swenson, who is the chair of Republicans Overseas. It's lovely to see you.
Great to be here, Neil.
I think it's so much better to have someone in the room that you can bounce ideas off, and Greg will be here for the rest of the show to take part in the conversations. So welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Some encounters are life-changing. You set out for a walk one day, and out of nowhere, the unexpected grants you a new perspective on the world around you. Broadcaster and marine biologist Monty Halls was walking beside the Dart estuary in Devon recently when his eye was caught by a pod of dolphins in the water. He joins me now to tell me what happened next. Hello, Monty.
Hello, Neil, and hello, Greg.
Good.
Hello, Monty.
Yes, all friends together. Monty, this was a very eye-catching story. Why don't you just tell me what happened? Where were you? Why were you there? What were you doing? What did you see?
Yeah. It was. It's a very good, life-affirming moment. It's a good description. To get up close to these animals, as you know from some of your own previous work, it's a pretty special feeling, really, and particularly when one of them's in distress. And very important to note, it was me and a whole bunch of other people as well, but I was lucky enough to kind of be first on the scene, as it were. But it was a pod of common dolphins up a place called Old Mill Creek, which is a tributary of the River Dart, and they don't belong up there. There's something wrong when one of them's up there, and we think one of the animals was sick, and the others had followed it in, so there was a mother and a calf, and we think a big male, and it was the male that stranded. And so, yeah, we managed to get to it, me and a few other people. And, to be really up close and personal with these animals, particularly when they're in distress, and your presence potentially can help them and save them and, get them back out where they belong, was really special. And over a couple of hours, we managed to sort of turn it around, get its blowhole out of the mud, get it in a sling, and then sort of walk it down a tributary towards the main river. But there was a rather nice moment. It must have been the TV presenter in me, I think, the marine biologist in me, where everyone else dropped away, and it was just me and the dolphin for the last 100 meters or so, and then off it went, into the ether. It was a great moment, really. And the lovely thing, by the way, if I can just add, was a volunteer effort. So we had the Coast Guard there, we had the lifeboats standing slightly offshore to make sure we were okay. We had volunteers from British Divers Marine Life Rescue, and often we worry about the world we live in, and we worry about our integrity and our character. And all you had to do was look at that group of people who emerged from nowhere to help that animal look after each other. And it sort of restores your faith in humanity, really. So there we are.
There is something almost indescribable about encountering close up a big animal like that, a mammal that is sentient. And to be aware of being perceived and being watched by another thinking thing is something that stays with you ever after.
It's very true. And they used to say to the old whalers back in the day that you should never look into the eye of a whale because if you do, you will lose your soul. And actually, my little theory about that is if you look into the eye of a whale, you will never kill another one. And it wasn't good for business that these young apprentices on board looked into the eyes of these animals. And you're absolutely right that there is I don't want to get all sort of ululating about it. There'll be no ululating. But there's a real connection there. And particularly when it's in distress and you're there to help it. It was really special. It was only a couple of hours, strangely enough. But really special. I won't forget it, and I don't think anyone else when he was there.
Greg is nodding along here as you speak. It is a thrilling thought, isn't it?
Yeah, I wish it was me. Now I saved a couple of children from a burning building last night, but this thing is much better, much better.
What?
Wow!
It's a joke. Yeah.
Did you?
Okay.
But you had me there.
But I'm thinking about I just wanted to outdo Monty, but I'm thinking about the great movie The Deer Hunter when he looked the deer in the eye and he couldn't pull the trigger at the end of the movie, even though he was a hunter and had hunted all his life. And it's really interesting what you say, Monty, about seeing the eye.
Lemba, I think you're still with me. Does it, as one, I know you're very interested in other, search for intelligence elsewhere in our universe. It's useful to be reminded, isn't it, that we already have other intelligent life right beside us, whether we pay them proper attention and give them due respect or not.
In my judgment, dolphins and whales have got a comparable intellect to ourselves. They may not be stupid enough to pay taxes, but they do everything else very well. And there are plenty of examples around the world, and I was fascinated by what your contributors were just saying about this, where we can see this is the case. Now, you mentioned sentient life elsewhere, and it leads to a very interesting question. I'm the chair of parliament for Asgardia. It's the world's first space nation. It sounds a bit kooky, but actually it's about asking questions. How do we live if we go off Earth? What do we do when we meet other sentient life? And maybe a question to your guests there is this: how do we interact with other species, either on planet Earth or elsewhere, who seem to share our sentience? What is our responsibility there? Can we actually live up to it? Or do you think that we are just a danger to ourselves and the rest of the cosmos?
Monty, if I can invite you to take on that very big, grand thought.
I have
should we?
I have a perfect response. I think a perfect response. One of the original astronauts, when they trained in a Native American reserve before they went to the moon. So the story goes. And an old Native American guy was watching these astronauts train, because obviously, the dust, the desert, the barren terrain, very similar to the surface of the moon. And right at the end, he went up to one of the astronauts and said, "You've been training on my land, and this is the place of my people. Can you pass a message from my people to anyone you might encounter on the moon?" And he told him to say something in the Native American tongue. And the astronaut was really touched, and he learnt it. And he went back and spoke to a friend who was a Native American and said, "I've been given this expression to say to any life form we meet on the moon." And he said the expression, and his friend laughed. And he said, "What did the Native American elder tell me to say?" And he said, "He told you to say, if they say they're coming in peace, don't believe them." That was the expression that the native elder had asked him to say. I'd say our track record is not good. It's not good, is it?
And yet, you're right. But so many times I hear experiences the like of which you just described with that dolphin. If anyone is blessed with that opportunity to be close and to spend some time with one of these creatures, I think it resets your clock, and it resets your perception.
Neil,
or if it doesn't, there's no hope for you.
I think that's a really good point. And you were talking about fundamental human rights and fundamental constants that should be the foundation of society. And I've found in all my travels, and I'm sure you're the same, there are certain commonalities amongst all of us, and one of them is if you see a dolphin, you will smile. It is irrelevant. Your background, your inclination, your religion, your age, your ethnicity, irrelevant. If you see a dolphin, you will smile. And so there is something going on there. Yeah.
I thought of something this afternoon, Neil. My mother died last year. It wasn't tragic. But I've been thinking a lot about death, and I actually think possibly, spoiler alert, big heavy comment coming up now. I actually wonder what our sentience, our context is in the universe. And I've come to this view, early formed view now. I think that we're like water. We start as ice, then we live as liquid like we are now. And then when we die, we become steam. And we become part of everything. If that's right, then we will be part of the dolphin culture, part of the whale culture, part of the whole life culture, and life anywhere else in the universe as well. Isn't that an exciting concept? They're actually one with everything. Heavy, yes, but true, I think.
I'll just chip in my tuppence worth. I spent some time in New Zealand with a Maori elder who lived close by a place where quite often pilot whales would come in huge pods and beach themselves, hundreds at a time, and it's terribly tragic. They often die. And the Maori elder said that in their culture it was understood that because these animals had once been land animals, that even after 50 million years back in the water, they retained a desire that when they were tired or ill, they just wanted to stop swimming and lie down, and so they would come to the land. That there was some residual need just to, do you know what? I just want to get on that beach and lie down, and that would be their undoing. And I thought, I don't know, but it was a fascinating thought. Thanks all for that. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. Monty, thanks so much for making time for us and bringing a little bit of animal magic into all of our lives. Beautiful stuff.
No worries, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you. Speak again. Now, after the break, we'll be hearing the amazing story of this week's Great Britain. Stay with me.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We're back in my bay.
Welcome back. Just chatting there with Greg. We're still talking about dolphins here. It's overwhelming. Each week, around this time, we try to shine a light, a spotlight, if you will, on somebody doing something remarkable for others. And we call this section Great Britons. This week, we reflect on the remarkable life of Rhys Langford. Now, the truth of it is, Rhys died at home on Wednesday morning, after his osteosarcoma spread to several areas of his body. He was 19 years old, but despite his own terminal illness, Rhys raised over £60,000 for 6-year-old Jacob Jones after reading that young Jacob had neuroblastoma. Now, here to tell us more about this story and 6-year-old Jacob is a family friend of Jacob, and it's Shan Probert. And Shan is with me tonight. Hello and good evening, Shan.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, it's honestly, this section for me is so important. I find it a restorative in amongst so much else that's going on, to hear about people who stand up in the face of such difficult challenges. And uniquely in this event, I thought we would honour both Rhys and Jacob and consider them both to be what they are, which is great Britons. If you could, I know you're closest to Jacob, if you could tell us a little bit about him and his current condition.
Well, Jacob Jones, he was diagnosed in 2017 with neuroblastoma cancer. This is a cancer that is mainly under children of 5 years of age. So it was pretty tragic. In 2018, he spent his second birthday having chemotherapy. As time went on, he became very poorly. He had a lot of chemotherapy, and he ended up obviously having to have an operation to have this tumour removed that was on his kidneys. They couldn't remove all of the tumour because a lot of it was all tangled in nerves and everything. So he had a lot of radiotherapy. The radiotherapy made him very poorly, but in the end, it did end up that he managed to ring the bell, and in 2018, he was in remission. So that was wonderful.
How did paths cross between Rhys and family and Jacob and family and friends? How did they come together?
Well, after Jacob had all his DFMO treatment in America, it was found out that he had lumps on his liver. So we had to raise some more money for Jacob, needing some more scans and everything else that would go along with all the treatment he would need. So Wales Online put a spread about Jacob and what had happened to him and how we needed to raise some more money. And Rhys had picked that up, and basically he contacted Jacob's Fight Fund and donated £1,000 of his own savings, which was absolutely amazing. Then Rhys found out that we needed to raise about £30,000 for Jacob so he could have special CAT scans and everything else. And he started a GoFundMe page. And the GoFundMe page just went absolutely crazy and mad. And he had raised £66,000 for Jacob. It was amazing. We are so overwhelmed. His family is so overwhelmed that this is something. He became Jacob's hero. He did say, we said he couldn't save himself, but he wants to try and help and save Jacob. It's quite emotional.
I was talking earlier in this show about how much children have been going through for the last couple of years, with the challenges presented by lockdown and all of the rest of it, and the importance of prioritising our children. And it's honestly hard to know where to go with a story such as you just described there. Rhys, so young, when he was laid low with this, and Jacob, of course, so very young, that this has somehow have brought them together, and that Rhys, in his time of the most intense personal need and personal difficulty, that he would divert attention away from himself towards another fellow human being. I really, it's above and beyond me. I just know that hearing testimony like yours is uplifting, even though the story itself has so much darkness shot through it.
It is. It really is. For somebody in such a dark place himself to put so much compassion, for Jacob. He had never even met Jacob, and they were from the same town, but it just, you can't believe what his family are going through. And us as a fund, we're deeply, really, really sad about what's happened, but we're ever grateful for what Reese has done for Jacob. Words will never express how grateful we are.
Yes, of course. Well, in amongst all of it, that you're making time for us tonight, 1,000 thanks, and my thoughts, our thoughts, with Reese and family, with Jacob and family, but I have to just say that it is that what they demonstrate, what they are examples of, is everyday greatness, without which we are the less. So thank you so much for telling us that story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
My pleasure and my honour. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now, there's lots more to come between now and 9 o'clock, but at the moment, it's time for an update of the news headlines. Here we go. Yes, I was slightly premature there, but we are definitely going to the news headlines now. Oh, it's still me, Luke. No.
Try again. Good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8. I'm Miranda Shunker with the latest from the GB newsroom. A phone call held between Presidents Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin this afternoon to try and de-escalate tensions on the border of Ukraine has resulted in no significant breakthrough. That's according to a US official who said that despite the call lasting over an hour, it remains unclear whether Russia will now move closer to military action. However, a Kremlin official said the call took place against a backdrop of hysteria and that the US had failed to address key security concerns. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned there would be repercussions if Russia now launches an attack.
We and our allies have made this crystal clear to Moscow. If President Putin decides to take military action, we will swiftly impose severe economic sanctions in coordination with allies and partners around the globe. We'll bolster Ukraine's ability to defend itself. We will reinforce our allies on the eastern flank of NATO.
Well, meanwhile, in Ukraine itself, thousands of people have marched through the capital to show unity against threats from its neighbour. Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky has urged people not to panic and pushed back against what he said were bleak war predictions being reported in the media. Despite his appeals for calm, many countries, including the UK, have urged their citizens to leave the country, warning there won't be any military evacuations if commercial flights have to end. A number of people are being treated after a mezzanine floor collapsed at a bar in East London. At least 7 people had to be rescued by firefighters who were trapped on what was left of the upper level in the 2 More Years bar in Hackney Wick just before 5 o'clock. Firefighters carried out a full search of the building before several people were taken to hospital, but the extent of their injuries is still unknown. French police have fired tear gas at demonstrators in Paris after so-called freedom convoys made it into the capital. Inspired by the ongoing events in Canada, protesters are demonstrating against COVID-19 restrictions. So far, 300 motorists have been fined and at least 14 people arrested. Well, meanwhile, France has reduced its entry requirements for British travellers ahead of the half-term holidays. Fully vaccinated Britons no longer have to take a COVID test before departure. That includes anyone who's received their most recent dose within the past 9 months. Unvaccinated people must have a compelling reason to travel to France, as well as proof of a negative COVID test 48 hours before departure. Well, on TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Neil Oliver Live.
Welcome back. Every now and again, the technology enables us to demonstrate that this really is live television. Thanks for staying with us. Now, Austria is the first and so far only country in the European Union to make COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for all adults. By a vote of 47 to 12 in favour, the upper house of the Bundesrat, the Austrian parliament, formally approved the new law. Everyone 18 and up has to take the vaccine or face a fine of up to €3,600 unless they are pregnant or seriously ill. It remains to be seen just how far Austria is prepared to go when it comes to pressing the jab on those who say no. Joining me to discuss the move is Madeleine Petrovic, former Austrian MP for the Green Party. Good evening. Thank you for joining me.
Good evening from Vienna.
Now, this is such a hot topic, you know, and in many ways it still feels like a fast-moving story. What's your reaction to this new law that's been passed in Austria?
Yeah, the law is passed. They are still not fining people. They say they are going to start to fine people who refuse to get those vaccinations by the middle of March. And you can be fined a maximum 4 times a year. So the maximum is 4 times €3,600. So this is for most people, this is an enormous sum of money. And there are, of course, a lot of protests here in Austria. There are big demonstrations in Vienna, in Graz. There are also convoys of cars, and there are different groups of people joining together, like me from the legal side, or physicians from the medical side. There are actors, some few journalists and artists. We join together to fight that law because we think that this is a personal decision. It has to stay a personal decision. And moreover, they intend to deliver very personal data in a non-anonymized way. So our data will be delivered to the pharmaceutical companies, and we don't want that.
Is there a sense in Austria that the majority of people are in favour of this situation getting increasingly severe for the unvaccinated?
Yeah, I started warning the government and the public in summer. I wrote articles for newspapers. I said, please don't split up society. It is too dangerous what you are doing. I mean, I'm personally not against the vaccinations in general at all. So, but it must stay a personal decision. A personal decision of everybody, and of course you must have a consultation with the physicians of your trust, and this is not possible either. So if you say that you don't want to be vaccinated and there are medical reasons, then there are just the official doctors. All of them are in favor of this mandatory vaccination. So you have practically no chance of escaping. There are also people already thinking of leaving the country. And so there's much concern. I think that a majority in Austria is not for the mandatory vaccination. There is probably still a majority for getting those vaccinations. And all of our media, or most of the media, they have just they are in favor of the vaccinations. There are advertising campaigns. They pay millions and millions of euros for this advertising, and so people believe, or many people still believe, that this vaccination is safe and that it really works, that it prevents you from becoming ill. But by now we see that the number of adverse side effects is rising every day, and there are severe side effects.
Madeleine, if you bear with me, I'd just like to open this up to Greg Swenson here, who's with me from Republicans Overseas. Greg, how do you react to that, watching those pictures and hearing about a 21st century liberal democracy that's taken this path?
It's really worrisome. I mean, what's happened in Austria, and then you look at New Zealand and Australia, where people have been trapped for 2 years now, and it's really sad. And I'm so glad to see this brave woman who's actually making an argument against that. It doesn't necessarily mean that any of us here are against getting a vaccination, but it should be a choice. And so it's a very troubling time. Look what's going on in Canada right now. And I think that this is a moment where traditionally the left were prone to be averse to big government or the man, the sort of anyone telling you what to do. And I'm troubled that there's so little argument from the left where you would traditionally expect that. And that's why, again, I'm glad to see her making a stand on this.
Yeah, and Lemba Opik, politician and broadcaster, still with us this evening. Lemba, how do you react to these pictures, Madeline's story of what's happening at the moment? Austria becoming more and more totalitarian, it would appear.
Well, I'm very concerned about it. I'm an intense libertarian, as I said before, Neil. And I think you've got the right to make decisions which are bad for yourself. It's a more grey area when it comes to making decisions which might be bad for other people. What we're talking about here is control of our bodies. And de facto, if you take the Austrian approach, you say that you can't do certain things unless you give some degree of control to the state. We actually had this debate about fluoride in water and various other things. Now, I've been triple vaccinated, and it's quite interesting what Madeline said, because I had a really bad reaction to the booster, probably because I got a very strong immune system, but I had what amounted to toxic shock in some form. I don't want the state to be able to tell me to do that, to get that kind of thing put into my body. But here's the problem. We do seem to be doing the same thing about the environment, where I'm being told what I can and cannot do based on what I believe is a false prospectus about our impact on the environment. Not going further down that path, we have to have a debate somewhere in this world where we discuss whether the public has the right to tell our politicians what to do or the other way around. And that's where we're heading. There's a collision course between democracy and authoritarianism, and it's only months away.
Madeline, to come back to you in Austria this evening, is there a suspicion that this could get even more forceful? At the moment you're talking about, multiple fines if people continue to stand firm against taking the vaccination. Is there another step further down the road that people are afraid of?
The pressure is growing. So, for example, you can't take part in a discussion on Austrian television, so the official television, the Republic of Austria, unless you are vaccinated or you have already passed the illness. And there are universities, they kick out the students who refuse to get vaccinated. And some companies say that people are not allowed to work there any longer, and they won't get unemployment money. So they are really under pressure. And I mean, I have children, I have grandchildren, and I'm really concerned what is happening. And I have, among my family, there's a case of a very young person of 25 years who is now seriously ill and can't work now for more than 8 months. He has a kind of problems with her heart, myocarditis. And it's really very, very bad, has to take strong medicine, can't work. Parents have to help this person. And so we are all really very much concerned, especially for the children and the young children. They are already thinking of lowering the age. So by now it's 18, but they also put the children under pressure. There are teachers in school who are really mobbing those pupils who are not vaccinated.
Madeline Petrovich, former MP for the Green Party, thank you so much for bringing that to us. I find it so alarming to be honest. I hear testimony from countries all over, and I feel as if it's only when I hear directly from people in the locations that I even begin to glimpse what's really going on in those places. It's a deeply troubling time. My panel is still with me, former MP Lambert Opic and political commentator Greg Swenson. But moving on, a completely different topic now. Darcy and Maxwell Jacobs were born on the 24th of August 2015 after just 27 weeks of pregnancy. Max weighed just 1,220 grams and Darcy just 930 grams. It's too alarming really even to think about. Both needed treatment for heart problems. Both had episodes of stopping breathing, something that happens with premature babies on account of them sometimes simply forgetting to breathe. How terrifying is that as a prospect for a parent? For Darcy and Maxwell's parents, Anita and Morn Jacobs, there then followed weeks and months of anxiety, and Anita joins me now to talk about the struggles they all went through to overcome the odds and why she and Morn are calling for much better help and support for parents of premature babies. So thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
So much that you've gone through. I'm a dad, but I don't have a tale like yours to tell. First of all, how are Max and Darcy?
They are absolutely fine.
Bring us all up to date. What age are they? What stage are they at?
6 years old. They are, they're doing brilliantly at school. They're loved by everybody. They are my NICU warriors. We call them our NICU graduates because obviously they've gone through NICU and then come out. There they are.
There we
see them.
Yeah. Big as life.
They are just wonderful, happy, loving little children.
Lovely. But to rewind, to go back, talk us through the stress of their first hours and days, if you can bear so to do.
The first hours, I'd phoned the hospital in the morning. I also have an older daughter, so I'm aware of the process. I know how things work. And I'd phoned the hospital and said, oh, there's something not right today. And they said, oh, there can't be anything going on at all. Please get yourself a nice warm bath and just take a day's rest, as I did. So then realised that something was very wrong and went to the hospital. All evening I was saying to the hospital, it's not right, there's something wrong. No, you can't be right at all. We're going to sort this out for you. Okay, no problem. And I remember one of the ward managers saying to me, oh, you've just caught us mid-shift. So we're going to do the handover and then come in to see you. And we'll bring an anaesthetist in and just make sure that everything's okay if the babies are delivered. So she left and my husband and my daughter were with me at the time. And I said to my husband, do you mind just taking Amine out of the room? And I distinctly remember him saying, oh, where do you want me to take her? At this moment, darling, I'm not that worried. Yeah. And at which point I turned to the midwife in the room and I said, I'm terribly sorry, the first baby's here.
Wow.
And she said, I'm sorry? And I said, the first baby's here.
Oh,
and she sort of lifted the blanket off of me and there was Darcy still laying in her sack and she hit the crash button. And my husband, who was outside of the room, said that everyone from every direction just came running.
Terrifying.
And Max was born 7 minutes later, and then we didn't see them for 3 hours. So I actually didn't see my children until the 25th of August. And we all went in to see them together. And I can be heard saying how beautiful they are. In reality, I didn't believe that. What I was faced with is something like a screwed up piece of chewing gum that had pipes coming out of them, and it's so difficult to try and explain.
What sense of can you give us a sense of the size, say, of Darcy?
Darcy, I think, is about, if you think about 16 Mars bars.
Okay.
That's it. My husband wouldn't hold her for probably a good 2 months because he was just frightened that she would break. You could hold her like this.
And the taking delivery of a baby is scary, full stop. But what are the challenges of taking delivery of premature babies that would be unknown to those of us who haven't gone through what you've gone through? What is it that is so very, very different?
I spoke to the matron of the neonatal intensive care unit, and her words to me, well, you won't be taking these babies home until around their due dates. And I said, how can you be so sure? I said, you're talking as if when, and in my head, I'm thinking if. You have these tiny babies that you know are fighting for life, then the next day I had to go home. There was nowhere for me to stay in the hospital. My husband came in, he picked up his broken wife, who he then led from the unit down the stairs, put me in a car and drove me the 2 hours to get me home. And I had to leave that little piece of my heart in the unit and just hope that they were getting the care that they needed.
Now, what is it that you want to see change? I'm presuming that you've been in contact with other parents of premature babies, that you've shared experiences. What is it that the system needs to be doing? How does it need to be structured in relation to parents that it's not doing at the moment?
Effectively, I spent 12 weeks of my maternity leave in hospital without taking care of my own children. So I actually only had 6 months at home. So 12 weeks of my 39-week statutory maternity was spent in the hospital with somebody else looking after my children. What I want to see is what we were promised back in 2019 and that made its way into the budget in 2020, that there is a neonatal leave and pay entitlement for parents who have children who are extremely premature. And in fact, children that spend longer than a week on the unit. For this change and this entitlement to come through, for every week that your child is on the neonatal unit, you will get an additional week's maternity leave. And as for a father, paternity leave too. And up until the age of 28 days, if your child is then taken back into the intensive care unit for whatever reason, you will still accrue this maternity leave or the additional maternity paternity cover. It's so important. It's not necessarily a monetary thing, it's a time thing. It allows you to breathe out and think, well, actually, I am going to get the same amount of time with my babies as other parents will have done who had a baby one day and walked straight out the next day, taking their baby with them.
And maternity leave, it doesn't necessarily apply, does it? It's not as constant as we think it is. And also in the case of those parents who, for whatever tragic reasons, walk out of hospital without a baby, then maternity leave as it stands doesn't necessarily apply.
It all depends on the gestation of the baby. I think it is 24 weeks that normal maternity cover will apply. But obviously that's just for a mother. But a father has lost a child too. It's not just a mother that would suffer that. I've seen instances where a father has taken paternity leave and unfortunately they haven't walked out with a baby, and work have contacted him within a couple of days and said, well, you know, there's really no need for you to have paternity leave. You don't have a baby at home now. That's incomprehensible to me.
Lembit Opik, I think you were extremely exercised there about the testimony that you were hearing from Anita, and I think perhaps there was something you maybe wanted to ask or a comment you wanted to make, and I'm not surprised.
Anita, I was very moved. I'm a very soft person, really, but I've got a bit of piece of history here. My first child, Angelina, was in intensive care briefly. My second child, Sabina, gave birth. She wasn't really premature, but she ended up in intensive care. And I remember following little Maria down to the intensive care unit, and what you said described almost exactly what happened to little Maria. And the reason I was moved by it, and probably viewers didn't see it, but it's because I feel what you said. Now, luckily, Maria is probably about 5 meters away from me now. She's sleeping. But if she hadn't been successful, if she hadn't made it through, the idea of going back to work 4 days later is actually inhumane. It's actually inhumane. I'd never really thought about it until you've just said this, Anita. Two things I credit you with, Anita. First of all, is your eloquence. And secondly, that you've actually got a very clear policy proposal there. I hope that government ministers and those listening from government, because they do watch, will take seriously what you say. And if there's anything I can do to help you achieve this, then I'm at your service.
Thank you very much.
And Greg, it's quite a story, isn't it? Unless certain things happen to you in your life, you're left in blissful ignorance. I'm hearing all of this for the first time.
Yeah, it's news to me. You know, of course, I have children, and I know many who've had premature children. And I think unless you go through it yourself, it's impossible to relay that. But it's a fantastic story, and I think. You know, it was great to see your children, by the way, on the monitor. You know, so we know they're not this big anymore. You know, it's all worked out. So you know, good for them, good for you. But I think that it's important. And we were talking earlier before we came on the set that, you know, what's happened in the last 2 years, it has been horrible for people who couldn't see their grandparents before they died or spend time with loved ones. But imagine having a premature child and then being told you're not allowed to, you know, to visit. It's complete ignorance and also there's no common sense. You know, it's the same with the earlier topic with, you know, the vax mandates in Austria and all over the world. There's no common sense anymore. Okay, maybe there was a time where we thought spreading it was enough reason to force people to either stay home or wear a mask or get a vaccination. But now we all know that you can spread it anyway, even if you're vaccinated. So why punish people and why punish mothers who've just had a child and because of some COVID restrictions can't go to the hospital or can't see their children? It's absolute insanity.
Last word to you, Anita.
It's, as we were saying, the reason that the bill of the entitlement didn't go through or hasn't progressed as far as it should have done was because of COVID. But if you look at the COVID on a neonatal unit, for the last 2 years, some areas, parents have only been allowed to sit with their children for 2 hours a day, and that's only one parent. If both parents wanted to go to the hospital, they had to book a time slot. So to take it back to my situation, I had 2 children. Had it have been during pandemic times, there were 97 days, I'd have been allowed to sit with each of my children for 1 hour a day. So I'd have seen my children for the total of 7 hours a week. And then
we've run out of time on it, but no, not at all. And it's so important to hear it. Your testimony is so heartrending. I'm so pleased. I know we all are that Max and Darcy are fine, and they are the lovable and successful and thriving children that they are. And it's so important to hear that. This is news to me, and I wish you all the very best with campaigning for the result that you need. After the break, news of a mammoth discovery in Devon. And we'll go to Hebden Bridge in West Yorkshire to speak to a great-grandmother who has been running her village shop for almost half a century, only taking time off on Christmas Day. See you soon.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. Now, regular viewers will know just how much I enjoy stories like the one coming up. The remains of a woolly mammoth have been found among a host of hugely significant Ice Age animal bones in a cave in Devon. The bones, including those of a woolly rhinoceros, a wolf and a hyena, are thought to date to the last Ice Age, 30,000 years ago, thereabouts, or even more. Archaeologists found the remains during work as part of the development of a new town near Plymouth. Leading the dig was Rob Bourne, Managing Director of Orion Heritage, and he joins me now. Good evening, Rob. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Neil.
It's a fantastic story, so exciting. What is it like to be in the presence of and handling such remains of such an age?
It's pretty special. I mean, I've never dealt with anything quite as old in my archaeological career, or remains found in such an unusual situation as well. And these remains, which is of 30 to 60,000 years ago, dating back to times when Devon would have looked very, very different to what it does now, is pretty special to be involved with. As you can see from the team there, it's also a very challenging, fairly challenging place that they're working in as well. So all in all, a pretty amazing discovery and an amazing archaeological excavation.
They've been found in a cave. Was the existence of the cave known about before the work on the new
No,
town?
it was found during construction works. Couldn't have possibly been predicted to be there. It was too deep underground. So it was a surprise for all.
Now, the question I'm sure a lot of viewers would ask is, why would those animal remains be where they were found? You know, not just the mammoth, but also the rhinoceros and others besides. What's the likely scenario?
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't finished doing the analysis work. All the bones are currently in Royal Holloway University being cleaned and conserved, and then they'll be studied in detail. So we won't know all the answers yet. But the main thought at the moment, because we've got partial remains of things like the woolly mammoth and the rhino, is that they probably died somewhere nearby. And then if you imagine the landscape at the time would have been very different to today. It would have been a lot colder, as you said in your introduction. It was during the last ice age. There would have been flood events and all sorts of things like that. So they probably died nearby and were washed into a hole in the ground, effectively. Probably not whole. Bits of them would have been left on the surface. But the wolf was a complete skeleton, so that probably went in alive and then couldn't get back out again.
It reminds me, I have to say, of some of the story of Goat's Hole Cave at Paviland on the Gower Peninsula, you know, the last resting place of the Red Lady of Paviland, and how in that cave also were found mammoth remains and other ancient species, you know, so that event you just described, that accumulation over time has happened before in other places, but we just occasionally are blessed with snapshots of it.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't know how quickly the remains collected. We don't know if this is a single event
or a small period of time, or have these collected, they might feel they may have collected over from a number of events and not actually all ended up in there together. But, again, that's what we're hoping to try and start to work out as we start doing the post-excavation analysis works.
What will happen next from the point of view of, the public being able to see these extraordinary finds? Will they be displayed, and what will happen to the cave?
Well, the remains that we found, as I said, with the investigation works have only just finished. So we've only just started to unpack them, let alone really get to the detail of what happens to them ultimately. But what happens now is they'll be cleaned. They need to be conserved with specialist input because they've been in the ground for tens of thousands of years. So they're very, very fragile. The wolf skull, for example, needs a lot of work doing to it before it can even really be handled. But once they've been conserved, they will then be a detailed study of the bones themselves and also of the environmental samples we took of the deposits that are actually in the cave to try and recreate what the environment was like that the animals were living in. Once that work has been done, the remains will be deposited back at Plymouth Museum, where they already have a gallery called the Mammoth Gallery, which has a full-size replica of a woolly mammoth in it. So ultimately, the museum will incorporate them into their displays in the Mammoth Gallery.
Rob, it's absolutely fantastic stuff. We were speaking earlier in the show to Monty Halls and an encounter that he had with a live dolphin that had become trapped in the River Dart in Devon. And he expressed the emotion of being in the presence of that animal. But that idea of being in the presence of the remains of a species that that last roamed there thousands of years ago is what a profound and moving privilege for you all.
It is. I mean, it was a very small team involved, and especially the team who were underground. I mean, I wasn't doing the actual excavation myself. But we had a team of 4 people working underground for 6 or 7 weeks as you've seen from the film clips, in some pretty challenging conditions. And, to get these amazing remains coming out of the ground. And as you said, I haven't handled them myself because I said they're very fragile. But yes, it's been a very special experience.
Excellent stuff. Thanks so much for joining me this evening, Rob Bourne of Orion Heritage. Wonderful. Talk about that for hours. But thank you for being with us. Moving on, a great-grandmother in West Yorkshire has been running a convenience store in a tiny hamlet for nearly half a century. Maystock's shop near Hebden Bridge has been supplying hikers and isolated villagers with goods since 1974, opening her doors from 7 in the morning to 9 at night every day except Christmas Day. GBNews' own Anna Riley went along to speak to May to find out what's made her business such a staple, located in a place where there's more sheep than people.
Nestled at the top of a valley above Hebden Bridge in a remote corner of Yorkshire lies Maystock's shop. The locals call it an Aladdin's cave, and inside it's packed with everything you'd need. The store has been run by the 81-year-old great-grandma since the 1970s, first set up as a refreshment stop for walkers along the nearby Pennine Way, one of Britain's most popular hiking routes.
Well, it's a lifeline for a lot of them, because it's a long way. It's 240-odd miles from beginning to end, and a lot of it's worse than this. So if you can just do and get them on the way, and it makes them, give them a bit more encouragement to keep going.
Even though the area is so remote, with the rise of Airbnb and the amount of walkers, there's never been a day when someone doesn't call in for something.
We have a favourite walk over here, and it's great because we don't have to carry our lunch. We can come in and have a lovely sandwich or a pie and a lovely big pot of tea. Hot cup of tea. Yeah. That's what we like.
But it isn't just tourists who rely on May's shop. it's crucial to the small but spread out community and for isolated people in this remotest corner of the Calder Valley.
A lot of them are elderly and they won't have seen anybody for perhaps a week or something like that, because milkmen don't go now like they used to do they? And no, they come and we have a buffet and they just sit on the buffet and we make them a brew and and they change, you know, you can see when they're going out, the faces, they're happy. I've just done it so long, it's just part of life. And I've had a good life, so that's all that matters, isn't it? It's true Yorkshire grit, it just keeps us going, plodding on. Keep smiling.
So, despite May running the shop for half a century, she's certainly got no plans for retirement yet. Anna Riley, GB News, Calden.
How splendid. God bless May Stocks. Greg, where would we be? How poorer would our landscape be without places like May's shop and indeed characters like May?
It's a great story. Not only do I like to see people as they get older keep working, it's great for them. I know some incredibly productive 81-year-old CEOs, but also it's great to see a small business, you know, and it's not a chain, it's not you know, something you'd see in Heathrow at the, you know, at the airport, at the terminal. You know, this is an independent entrepreneur. It's fantastic to see. Family businesses, small businesses are always better.
Lemba Opic's still with me as well. There's real inspiration to be had, isn't there? As Greg says, in seeing someone who still sees it as completely normal and the stuff of life, just to be working away.
I've got loads of huge supermarkets not far from where I live here, and I get to know some of the staff, but there's no substitute for going into your local little shop and they just put what you want on the counter before you ask for it. I think that we have actually lost some of that intimacy in terms of the way that we live our lives, very simply because it's more profitable to do things en masse. But you know what, Neil, I think that there might be a spark. One piece of clue that could happen is the fact that the LP, the vinyl record, is coming back. If shops like May's come back, perhaps ironically, I'd love her to run a massive chain of shops just like hers all over the country.
I'm just thinking how wonderful it must be for a worn out walker, you know, maybe soaked to the skin, just about at the end of his or her tether, and they stumble across May's shop and go inside and realise that just about anything their heart's desire is there for the asking. It must be like a little bit of heaven in Yorkshire. After the break, I'll be asking my panel, what exactly is the point, if indeed there is a point, of Valentine's Day?
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Greg and I were just celebrating May stocks there, and that wonderful example of, why would you stop? If what you're doing, it keeps you fit, makes you happy. Inspirational. All right, well, Valentine's Day is upon us once more. It's on Monday, in fact, so if you haven't sorted something out already, you've had it. All but forgotten now is the fact our day of red roses and anonymous cards actually began as a Christian feast day in memory of Saint Valentine, who, before being executed by pagan Romans, sent a note of love to his jailer's daughter. Now, and I ask this genuinely, do we still need Valentine's Day? And if so, could we be making a better effort? Now, it seems ironic to me that three men are going to discuss the wrongs and rights of Valentine's Day. How I've allowed this to happen to us, guys, I can only apologise. However, let's go for it. Lemba, do you have beating in your chest a romantic heart?
I think the public record would suggest that I'm romantic to a fault. All I can say to you, Neil, is I don't want to be commercialised on it. If I love somebody, or if I fancy someone, if I want to have some intimate time, I shouldn't have to pay for it once a year on Valentine's Day. Now, you talked about the fable of how Valentine's Day came along. I'm not sure it's completely true, but you know what? Everybody who makes Valentine's cards, everybody who sells chocolates, everybody who can make hundreds of pounds out of Valentine's Day will love that. I think, yes, I am a romantic, but I don't just do it once a year. It's all year round. That's the truth, and I'm sure Greg would agree. Don't you, Greg?
Now, of course. I've just to make things even stranger, a fourth man just walked through the door and presented me with a dozen red roses, as if this evening couldn't get any stranger. They are from Prestige Flowers, and they are well. I mean, how classic is that? How classic is that? And we now have Marianne Gani, who is my Valentine's Day guest, and who is a woman. Which finally we have a member of the opposite sex among us to discuss all of this with. Marianne, I have here this. I'll freely admit it's a very, very beautiful bouquet of red roses. After all this time, are red roses by the dozen still the key? Is that where the magic still lies?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the number 12 in itself is complete. You get 2 lots of 12 hours a day, you got 12 months in a year, so I definitely think the 12 red roses is just a classic bouquet for Valentine's Day, absolutely.
Are we Brits, this is GB News, so I'm going to keep it local, are we Brits good when it comes to the business of Valentine's Day gifts? Are we imaginative? Are we thoughtful? Are we doing that which is required of us on Valentine's Day?
I mean, after recent research, we did actually find out that only 6% of British men will be going to a garage for their Valentine's flowers. So, I mean, I definitely think that's a really low number, but in perspective, that's really good. In terms of are Brits good at gifting, I think, sure, everyone is completely different in their own ways. In fact, 14% of men have actually said that they're going to be happy to spend up to £50 on a Valentine's bouquet, which is, a number one Valentine's gift. Classic. Yeah, absolutely. It's a healthy budget. Yeah, of course.
Lemba, how do you react to the research that says only 6% of men are still buying their Valentine's Day flowers in filling stations? Does that surprise you or not?
I think 94% are buying them somewhere else. I have to say, I will stand up for our half of the species. A lot of men I know love romance, but they're not allowed to do it because it's soft. It's not alpha male. So good on you, lady, for encouraging us to be soft, because you know what? Love makes the world go round. As I heard in an assembly recently for my child, love is one of the very few things that you give and you get more back.
You're right, Lambert. It's nice to talk a little bit about love. So, yeah, it's refreshing. It's refreshing to hear that. Marianne, tell us, what does research show that women actually really want on Valentine's Day? What would, in your professional opinion, be the right collection of gifts and sentiments to present a woman with?
I mean, with no surprise, of course, red roses. It's the #1 gift for Valentine's Day and has been since the 17th century. Coming in #2 is actually chocolate, which, again, there's no surprise there. Everyone does love some chocolate, especially at Valentine's Day. I think when it comes to gifts, I'd probably say stay away from your gift vouchers. As you know, there's not really much gesture there. There's not much sentiment either. And I think for such a special day, a lot of people do want just that sort of meaningful gift. And whether that is in a bouquet of roses and some chocolates, I think definitely that's, you know, the best gift you can give at Valentine's Day.
Now, Marianne, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure I read recently that some folk have moved Valentine's Day into a celebration they have with their children. That parents are giving children Valentine's cards and gifts. Now, am I right or am I wrong?
I think to be fair, I've heard that some families do that. Definitely, I've seen some parents get their child a Valentine's gift for, you know, the parent. I've had a lot of. I've seen a lot of times where, there might be like a little boy and he wants to have his first Valentine's, which is his mum, which I think is a lovely gesture. Every person is different in the sense when it comes to Valentine's Day, as, you know, it's seen as a very lovable day. And I think if you are going to share that with your family and your kids, I think that's absolutely lovely, yeah.
No, I'm taking all of that on board. Greg, if I can turn to you, am I right? You had to, at the last minute, cancel dinner with your wife this evening in order to come along here. Is that the case?
Yeah, but she'll forgive me. She loves GBNews.
She
loves watching me.
If I may, if it would oil the wheels of love.
I hope she's not watching. Then I'll be busted. Let's see.
Maybe you could use that as part of your armament.
Every day is Valentine's Day with me and my wife. Absolutely.
Lembit, do you have Valentine's Day under control? You know, you've already outed yourself as a romantic, loving man. Do you have the gifts ready for the object of your affection?
I follow the instructions I'm given. I think that if I have a crime and if I'm accused of over-romanticism, then, sir, I am guilty. 14th of February is a day that I plead guilty and ask for forgiveness from the other half of the species.
No, I think you speak for all of us. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for being there. The cake, the flowers, all of those gifts look wonderful, and thank you for the benefit of your expertise. That's all from me on Neil Oliver Live for this week. My thanks, as always, to my wonderful guests, to my here in the room panellist, Greg Swenson, and to my remote friend, Lembit Opik, my amazing team behind the scenes who told me to say that, and to you at home for watching. Mark Dolan tonight is up next. I will definitely see you next week. Thanks for all of that.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy for many. Let's take a look at the details. Across the southwest, persistent and heavy rain will push eastwards through the morning. It will be windy for all, but especially along the coasts. Further east, a cloudy and breezy start to the day with some drizzly rain at times. The winds will pick up through the morning. Across South Wales, another wet start to the day, very windy as well. Take care on the roads as there may be surface water. In northwestern England, rain will be likely heavy and unpleasant at times, particularly over higher ground. Across northeastern England, slightly calmer at first, but it will soon turn wet and windy here as well. The rain will likely be heavier and more persistent for many compared to Saturday. In southern Scotland, a drier and slightly calmer start to the day, though largely cloudy. By mid-morning, it will turn wetter from the south. For Northern Ireland, expect a drier and calmer start as well, fairly mild and cloudy. However, things turn wet from the southeast by mid-morning, driest in the northwest. The rain and strong winds will continue to push northeast with the dry weather reserved for northern Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up tomorrow morning.
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is one of the few opposition MPs fighting vaccine passports. Scottish Lib Dem MP Alistair Carmichael joins me at 10. In the big question, is Joe Biden fit to be president? We'll speak to a top US psychiatrist who says no. We'll bring you the latest on fears Russia is about to invade Ukraine. And in my big opinion, why aren't we drilling for shale gas? Plus my all-star panel, including radio and Fleet Street legend Mike Parry. See you at 9.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From